The Book of Adrian, Chapter 5. The Brotherhood. Adrian's consciousness drifted in and out of a fog, his body weighed down by exhaustion and pain. Faint murmurs like whispers on the wind reached his ears. He wasn't sure if he was dreaming, trapped in some feverish nightmare, or if he was truly waking to the world again. He opened his eyes slowly, blinking against the dim candlelight that flickered in the corners of his vision. Above him, 4 figures loomed, their faces partially obscured by dark hoods. They murmured in unison, their hands hovering over his broken body, their voices rising and falling like an ancient chant. Adrian's breathing was shallow, his ribs aching, but it was the sharp, persistent pain in his leg that jolted him fully awake. The memory of the arrow piercing his thigh flooded back to him, and he instinctively tried to move, only to feel a dull throb of agony where the wound had been bandaged. The priest's chant ceased as they stepped back slightly. One figure leaned closer, and through the haze of pain, Adrian recognized the familiar, weathered face of Father Gregor. The priest's eyes shone with quiet relief as he met Adrian's gaze. "Adrian," Father Gregor said softly, his voice filled with compassion. "You're awake." Adrian blinked again, his throat dry and his voice hoarse. "Where am I?" "You're safe," Father Gregor reassured him. "We've been tending to your wounds. The pain will pass, and you'll heal, but it may take time. You were hurt badly, especially your leg." Adrian's gaze wandered to his leg, where the arrow had struck. Beneath the bandages, he could feel the lingering ache, though it wasn't as sharp as it had been. His mind, still groggy, tried to piece together what had happened. "The scavengers," Adrian mumbled. "What happened?" Father Gregor's face darkened slightly as he nodded. "After you were struck by the arrow, I feared we would both be lost. But the Brotherhood arrived just in time. They fought off the scavengers and helped me escape with you. We brought you here, to the outskirts of Rennes, high above the creeping death, in the remains of an old church." Adrian looked around, taking in the dim surroundings. They were in a vast upper room, high above the ground, where the creeping death couldn't reach. The ceiling arched above them, the remnants of ancient stained glass windows casting faint colors across the stone floor. The church was crumbling, like much of the world, but it still stood as a sanctuary, at least for now. Adrian's heart pounded as he absorbed Father Gregor's words. "You saved me?" "Not just me," Father Gregor replied, his voice gentle. "The Brotherhood. I joined them when I first arrived in Rennes. I've been working with them ever since, fighting in secret against the bishop." One of the other priests stepped forward, his face obscured by his hood, and spoke in a low, serious tone. "Father Gregor has proven himself a worthy brother, as have the rest of us. We belong to a small order that still believes in justice, mercy, and the protection of the weak. But there are darker forces at play here, forces led by the man who has brought this city to its knees." The priest paused, glancing at the others before continuing. "Rennes is no longer what it once was. The creeping death ravaged it, yes, but it was Bishop Charon who plunged it into true ruin. He was always corrupt, but when the creeping death came, he seized the opportunity to take power. He publicly executed anyone who stood against him, blaming their greed and sins as the cause of the creeping death, calling it a judgment from an angry god." The priest's voice grew colder. The executions were not just displays of power. Charon made a spectacle of them, forcing the citizens to gather in the city square to witness the punishment. His enemies were placed in coffin-shaped cages suspended above the ground. After he condemned them, the cages were lowered into the creeping death itself, where the victims would burn and choke on the poisonous air, their screams echoing through the square. Adrian's stomach twisted as the image came to life in his mind. The bishop, standing tall and righteous before a terrified crowd as his enemies writhed in agony, suffocating in the poisonous mists below. The fear and horror would have been palpable. The people, the priest continued, his tone heavy with disgust, were driven to madness. Fear of the creeping death and their loyalty to the bishop grew with every execution. The crowds watched in silence, too afraid to defy Karen, knowing that they could be next. Adrian's heart raced as the priest spoke. He had witnessed the devastation of Rennes, but now it seemed the city's downfall had been orchestrated by the very man who claimed to protect it. "We, the Brotherhood," the priest continued, "could not stand by while the people suffered. We went underground, forming a resistance to fight against the bishop's tyranny. We are few, but we have hope. And now, we have you." Adrian stared at the priest, absorbing the magnitude of what he was saying. He had been thrust into a struggle far larger than he had ever imagined, but he had no reason to doubt these men. They had saved him, and their cause was just. "We've recruited others," Father Gregor said, picking up where the other priest left off. "People who believe in justice like Simon." At the mention of Simon, a shadow moved near the far corner of the room. Adrian stiffened, his hand instinctively reaching for a weapon that wasn't there. From the darkness, a pale figure stepped forward. A boy, wiry and thin, with sharp, calculating eyes. There was something different about him, an eerie quiet, as though the room itself bent around his silence. "Simon," Father Gregor said, gesturing to him. "He's one of our best. A master at slipping through the shadows, taking out the bishop's top officers before they even know he's there. He's mute, but his silence is a weapon." Simon nodded curtly at Adrian, his expression unreadable. Then, as quickly as he had appeared, he melted back into the shadows, as if he were never there at all. Father Gregor looked back at Adrian. "We've been waiting for the right moment to strike, and now, that moment is coming. But first, we need to free the innocent prisoners being held in the bishop's prisons. After that, we aim for Karen himself." Adrian's heart pounded in his chest as the weight of their mission settled on him. He was no longer just a survivor wandering through a dying world. He was part of something larger now, something dangerous, but necessary. "The Brotherhood saved your life," Father Gregor said gently, "and now we ask for your help. Will you join us in this fight?" Adrian flexed his fingers, feeling the dull ache in his leg and ribs. Despite the pain, he could feel his strength returning faster than he'd thought possible. The priests had done more than heal his wounds. They had given him a reason to fight again. "I'm ready," Adrian said, his voice steady despite the uncertainty swirling within him. "I'll help." Father Gregor smiled, his expression one of quiet resolve. "Good. Then rest, Adrian. Tomorrow we begin."